Hey there.
Hey, what's up? How you doing?
Good, good. So did you want to talk about the turf discussion, or I guess the aerial discussion that you had?
Yeah, we could. That one sounds like I need like a longer time to go over it, and I'm doing this kind of like in betweenish games. If you want, we can go. I'm curious to hear your take on the private public language thing. If you want to do that.
Yeah. So I guess the more and more I've thought about it, it seems like the question is um how do you like band-aid solutions to your system for like friends or personal requests or like life lessons you learned? Does it have to be logical to change your system?
Um, when okay, so I'm sure you know this. So, um, I try to avoid the word logical or rational in a discussion unless I have a concise meaning of what it means. When you say logical, do you mean like it follows some like deductive thought process where a conclusion like logically or like reasonably comes from some number of premises, or what do you mean by that? Just so I understand.
Yeah, I guess if you can't connect it to your current system of like arguments
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know how else to put it, but like the conclusions where you feel like I've arrived there from thinking about it diligently and I don't just have a feeling about it.
Yeah, I would like to imagine that most or well, I would like to imagine every position I have is like that. Yeah, so I should be able to
Okay.
connect it somehow argumentatively.
Okay. So I guess that's the tough part because sometimes there's things that people tell me where I take their word for it
Mm-hmm.
until I can like figure it out. But I mean, it's a different situation for you because you've gone through the this discussion so much.
Yeah,
Um, because for most people, I feel like they have a filter where the word with the hard R just kind of feels cringy coming off their lips, and they'll generally avoid it even in private. And so I think the idea that somebody not only does it, but like regularly defends it or isn't bothered by it seems strange.
um, yeah, I guess it can be, but that's not really an argument for anything, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like giving perspective on what people are feeling about this because then I think people try to jump in and they've taken different like approaches to convincing you of this, but unfortunately, none of them were very good. Like that
Yeah, I mean, I guess
podcast
if
you
you
went on.
want, we could try. I hate that I'm almost making an iDubbbz tier argument here. I mean, like, is your goal going to
Okay.
be to try to say that like all forms of racial or edgy humor are okay, except specifically racial or edgy humor involving the N word? Or
Yeah. So the problem I have is that like for my system, I looked into it.
mm-hmm,
Like I really tried to like sort out what I thought on this.
mm-hmm,
And it's just like a band-aid that's there. Like I don't feel like I need to do a ton of work at like we understand that the N-word has a lot of like historical context behind it. It can hurt people no matter, how it's heard. It can even hurt people just to know that you regularly use a word that has that capability to it, or
sure.
that you're perpetuating like the further private use of it, even if publicly you make an effort not to say it.
Sure.
Uh, I guess how come you can't extend that like public effort into private conversations? Like just like, hey, if I catch myself if it's going to come up in a joke or something, like for me for instance, I'll usually say like N word or like something else instead of like the actual word itself.
Um, I mean, I guess that like to be committed to a position like that, I don't think I'm wholly convinced that it would make sense to draw a box around just that word, and then
Sure.
like every other type of racial slur or negative thing is okay except for that one. And then if I were to commit to a position where it's like, yeah, okay, I think some things just shouldn't be in humor, they just shouldn't be joked about. I feel like you are very quick to basically get rid of all forms of like satirical or ironic like racial humor.
I feel like that's slippery slope. I just feel like that word in particular, like I make a special exemption for it just because if we had to pick like one word that kind of is the embodiment of like how you could do damage with a single word, I think that's the one.
I guess I just don't accept that. I guess I just reject that. Maybe we would have to go
Mm.
through it, but like I don't feel like
Like
I don't feel like the idea that if
because
I
it
told a
does.
word that I told a joke, like just saying N word in place of the N word, all of a sudden like makes it more. I don't know. That feels so silly to me. I just can't. I don't know. Like I would be
So
more amenable to an argument
let's
where it's like don't make that type of joke at all, rather than you can make the joke, but just say N word instead of the N word.
well, that's a good place to start because
Mm-hmm.
I'm just kind of curious on like how you conceptualize this. So like to you,
Mm-hmm.
if you had two people and they both told you a joke and one of them said N word and the other one said the full thing,
Mm-hmm.
would you not feel differently about the impact of both of those jokes?
Well, yeah, of course. Like saying the actual N-word, like, or any like big like no thing or whatever, like generally carries more of a punch with it, right? That's the whole point of that type of humor, generally.
So, and that was going to be my next question. So, there's a punch in using that word,
Yeah, of
and
course.
that's what you're holding on to want to continue to use it at this point.
Sure.
Okay. Because that just seems like a weird thing to want to hold on to instead of just not saying the
I don't
word.
think it's weird at all. I'm very careful when I hear arguments that start to get into like that's weird or that's not cool. Like I would argue the opposite for sure. I think it's very weird that like I could tell a joke where it's like, so yesterday I saw a bunch of N-words, but that's okay as long as you don't say the N-word. I wholesale reject that. I don't agree with that.
But I think it's a lot less bad than saying, hey,
I don't agree.
And like.
I don't agree that it's less bad. Even if I were to think of like racial usage of it, like if I were to be like, oh, like I've got this friend Triax, he kind of acts like an N-word sometimes. Like that makes me cringe almost as hard as hearing the actual word. Like that's super cringy to me. Yeah. So I reject that characterization. Like, well, the humor is okay as long as you say the N-word instead of actually saying the N-word.
No, I'm not saying the humor is okay either. I'm just saying that there is a difference between like self-censorship and saying the N-word versus actually saying the N-word. And I think there's a considerable difference between those two things.
I feel like that might be true, but I feel like if you're like if saying the N-word is 100%, then I think that like using racial or edgy humor privately is like 95%. Like I think you're basically already there. Like the idea that you could say like, oh well, it's okay to say things like racial or edgy humor as long as you like everyone understands that it's somewhat satirical, that you're not like being super serious about it. That's okay. But you can't say like a certain word. That seems like a weird spot to draw the line.
It does, but when people present me an argument, like it's a weird.
When I okay, let me be more concise. It's not that it's a weird spot to draw a line. It's that it's completely arbitrary, and I don't know how you could justify that line
it's not
there.
Arbitrary.
Well, but you're saying that like forms of racial or edgy humor that would never be acceptable in a public forum, or that could be interpreted in a racist or hateful manner, that's all okay. But saying the N-word is not okay because it can be interpreted in an edgy or racist manner. Like that doesn't make sense to me. I don't buy that.
Right now, I'm not trying to extend it necessarily all the way to like. It's, especially not allowed. Right now, I'm just trying to figure out, like, there is a distinction, like a significant distinction between saying N-word and, like, self-censoring versus, like, actually saying the word with a hard R.
When you say there's a distinction regarding what? Like, what is the distinction in? In humor or in all forms?
I think it's so when I say distinction and when I mean that has a big effect, what I'm referring to is the effect it has on people around you and like perceptions of you. Because I guess maybe that's where my brain goes most of the time with work and stuff. But like, if I told people or if people knew that I did not self-censor on the N-word, I think that's a mental note that most people will take. Like, holy shit,
for sure, they probably
just like drop the N-word with hard R. Like that's kind of crazy. And so like they're going to have that same takeaway, even if you tell them that privately I don't censor myself using that word. I think like you could easily get out of this by just even working on it. Like, yeah, when I catch it, when I know it's going to come up, I'll try to censor it. But I don't think that's something you honestly want to do. So I'm trying not to ask you to do that. Because I want to.
Wait, so you're trying to get me to acknowledge that if people like know I make a certain joke that they'll think like differently of me? Because I acknowledge that, of course, for sure.
But do you understand why it is for that one special word? Because I don't feel like it's arbitrary.
Well, I mean, it depends on how we define the word arbitrary. I mean, like, it is arbitrary, but I mean, like, socially, that word is treated differently than most of the other words, right? Or than every other word.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, any argument you could make for the N-word, like, deductively, logically, is going to fit for other words as well, right? So, for instance, like, the G word for Asian people, right? Like, there were tons of Chinese people that died building the railroads. We have a special history being, like, discriminatory against Chinese people.
They go back to a spectrum of bad. I just think that the N-word is at so far on the spectrum of bad that I just typically try not to use it. Like because we have to draw that line somewhere.
I don't think we do, though.
We should. Well, yeah, we don't have to.
Yeah.
Because it's your personal system. So no matter what, this is just a decision for you. Like, and this is the other part of it that's difficult is the prescriptions or like the takeaways that people have hearing you defend it, and they don't care what your defense of it is. It's like with this Ariel thing where like I just think you've said something or that you continue to defend something that like has effects on people who are not going to take it logically. Like they might just hold on to the argument that you have for that and some other arguments they know of yours, use them in private, because most people aren't. That like when they hear a 5-head take, they're just going to disengage. And
yeah, of course. But I mean, like,
spread further.
I mean, I'm as responsible as I can be. Like, I try to say as many times, like, this is, this is how I believe this should be used. I think I've even gone on record saying, actually, I know I haven't. I'll say it again. 9 times out of 10, when I hear a white person trying to give an argument to defend why they should say the N-word, most of the time it's just a racist guy. I'm totally open about all these, but I'm never going to get to the point where, like, I'm actually going to start to change a position because I'm, like, worried that somebody's going to, like, misuse the argument.
Yeah.
Like, all I can do is just be as responsible when I'm messaging as possible.
That a lot.
Oh yeah, no, I would never ever do that.
Well, that's kind of the prescription that you intuitively want to go to with that Ariel chick. Is like,
no, not at all.
But we have. Well, I mean, like, I heard you where you're like, it's tough. She's slippery because, like, she doesn't want to acknowledge that, like, these tweets that she's giving, other people are taking them and running with them in a different direction. And she seems to even be aware of that at some level, that she's conservative baiting.
Yeah, but the difference is like, do you try to do your due diligence in controlling that? So, like, I know for a fact that people have taken different arguments that I've made and have used them in a negative manner. And I've even joked about this. So, like, for instance, a popular one that I used to give on Twitter is, I don't think that sexual content belongs on Twitch. I actually don't. I don't think it does. However, when I make that argument on Twitter, every single time I do it, like, everybody in my mentions was like, fuck these sluts that wear, tank tops, fuck these whores that have, like, skirts on. It's like, whoa, hold on. Like, I have to be very careful to qualify my arguments because they will be used in ways that I don't want them to be, right? But that's just something that, like, I mean, that's a reality of being on the internet. Like, some level of people will misinterpret messages or use them in a negative manner. All you can do is, like, at least try to do your due diligence. Now, when I look at Ariel's timeline, she doesn't do her due diligence. She's making the rounds on conservative talk shows. She's being friendly to people like Steven Crowder. She's got, like, tons of misogynistic and transphobic comments that are showing up, like, in her own fucking like Instagram. Like, I don't think she's even tried.
I checked it out.
Yeah. Now, like, if she was, like, constantly saying, like, hey guys, like, I understand that conservatives have a lot of problems, but she's blatantly saying shit like, oh no, conservatives love trans people, stuff that's just not true. So I think there is a difference there.
Yeah. Okay. But so I'm just trying to paint a picture for how much of a cost is associated with this one little take. Because I think if we can put enough pressure on it, maybe that's what it'll take to, like, move the arbitrary distinction on, like, where we should, like, self-censor and like.
Well, but, like, should I change, like, my take on, like, incest? Like, because that's a really unpopular one as well.
It is, but I feel like that's, like, an ideological argument thing, and also, like, incest is not a topic that's, like, attacking, like, a culturally. I just don't think it's, like, a similar comparison. I think the N-word take has grander consequences than the other one.
Maybe. I don't know. The incest one is, like, that's one that, like, people immediately point out, like, right alongside the N-word. It's like, oh, Destiny, he supports incest. He wants daughters, fucking their dads. Like, people will point that out immediately when they talk about me, like, in other forums and shit.
I guess I wasn't compelled to spend hours and hours about the incest thing, but the N-word thing feels like, okay, this is just, like, an arbitrary line that you have to draw at some point with your language as to, like, because it's a conscious or unconscious. In either case, you're just choosing what words to use, and I think you could just as easily choose to say N-word, and it won't, like, take away from these jokes. And if it does, maybe you'll just, like, stray away from those jokes if they don't work as well without the hard R. But I just think, like, we have to, like, not have to, again, but you could draw this line anywhere. So I think just, like, at least drawing it to encompass the N-word and be like, I'm going to work on not saying it in private. I think that's all I'm trying to get out of this.
I disagree that it's a slippery slope, though. Like, I think that you could very clearly draw a line between, like, okay, well, I don't want to say this word in private because it's too offensive. Maybe there are some jokes I shouldn't make in private, period, because they're too offensive. I think one really naturally and logically leads to the other.
Yeah. If you want to. But I mean, like, that's not really similar. So it depends on how much it takes away from the joke. So, like, if the punchline is the N-word, I probably, like, wouldn't say that one anymore because it sucks without being able to say the N-word.
Well, so, like, I mean, like, are you familiar with that Atlanta skit? Have you seen the show before?
No.
So there is an Atlanta skit where there's a white guy quoting song lyrics or whatever. No. So there's a white guy talking to is it Danny Glover? I always fuck his name up. Talking about how, like, there was this DJ and he was playing this really, like, bad music or whatever. Fuck, hold on. Oh my god, Darius just fucked me so fucking hard. Sorry. But the guy is telling his friend, like, oh, you know, like, I walked up to this DJ and I told him, are you really gonna play Flow Rider again? And then he says N-word with a soft A, but then he says it, and like the joke is that when Danny's character later on asks him to when he later on asks him to tell that joke again to like blacker friends, if that makes sense, when the white guy repeats the joke, he doesn't use the N-word that time, and that joke only works because he said it the first time. Yeah. So like, I mean, like, I think there are jokes that are impacted by the types of words. Oh my god, that we're allowed to use.
There are, but those are like professional comedian people. I mean, I don't want to go down that route, but yes, I get what you mean.
Well, no, we can go down that road because like you're treating me like a professional comedian person to some extent, right? Like we have the same because if I was just a private citizen and I had these points of view, we wouldn't really care. So we're treating me like, okay, well, the reason
it does
why
less damage. But
yeah,
if
but the
I knew
reason
a friend personally did that, I would call him out on it.
Well, but you might not know because they might just not say it ever, and then we could argue
they
maybe
might not.
that no harm
they
is
were
done.
like you, like I saw on Twitter that they said like, you know, I'm okay with using him in private language and stuff. I'd be like, that's interesting. I want to talk to him about that.
Sure. I'm just hard inting, dude.
Sorry to hear that.
No, you're not sorry to hear that. Oh, dude, I'm getting so... I got camped so fucking hard by this fucking... Oh, okay, So the idea that, like, oh, it's a professional comedian, that doesn't absolve anybody of anything. Like, you wouldn't believe that argument. Sure. Yeah, so, like, yeah, because I could point to plenty of, like, famous comedians that have made really problematic jokes that aren't good, regardless of them being a professional comedian.
It's not a logical thing, but it's how I'm used to talking with people. I try to give them like a feel for something. Like,
oh, sure, yeah, but I mean, any argument that I would make for or against like a comedian saying something, I would use for a similar manner for myself because we both have public platforms, and that's where the problems are. Are we responsibly using our public platforms? Yeah. So,
but beyond that, if you're a private citizen, and that's why I'm saying it doesn't super matter to like the logical extent of what I'm saying. It's just I'm used to going to like anecdotes and stuff to like help contextualize stuff for people.
Yeah, I understand.
I don't need to do that with you.
Sure. So what was I saying? Oh, yeah. So it comes down to if it's problematic or not. Yeah. Wait, so we were talking about whether or not this could, like, is this a slippery slope, or can we logically draw a line from one to the other? I would say that any argument you could use for not saying a particular word, right, it's harmful, people have negative reactions to it, it invokes a certain feeling, all of that could be said of, like, any type of racial humor at all. Or any type of edgy humor.
You don't say?
What?
Or anything you refuse to say?
No, of course not. Especially like some of the stuff that's like the most taboo usually gets like is like the biggest like shocker in like a joke. It could be arguably, right?
But you don't want to say stuff that's not true, right? I think you kind of work at that. I mean, there's like
what do you mean not true?
We draw all over the place.
Because like technically no joke is true, right? I mean, I don't just say... So again, like, to be clear, because apparently some people do something... Like, I don't just say, like, oh, I know this black person who's talking... He's an N-word, he's an N-word, he's an N-word. Like, it's not like that, right? Like, it would... I don't even know 100%. I don't even know if I know any jokes with the N-word in them. I don't even know if I tell these jokes, to be honest.
Why would you say that you do?
Well, because I would defend the principle of it. Like, if I did know one that was, like, really funny or whatever and it worked with it, then I would. I don't know if I actually know any or if I do this at all.
Okay. I like this. I like this.
No, but that's not... No, but that's not the argument I want to make.
I'm not trapping you or anything.
Sure.
So, I like making a distinction between, like, in practice, do I actually ever even say it? If the answer is no, I would say that's really important context to then saying, but, like, I personally never say it, but I can understand from a logical standpoint how someone doesn't want you restricting their private speech or whatever. Like, to give
that
your
sounds so weaselly to me. That sounds like you are unwilling to commit to a position. I don't like that.
Okay, so you can understand logically where people... So, like, I had to talk with my dad today.
Yeah.
And he was like, the gun stores, their people are fighting about whether or not to close them. And I was like, well, if someone is honestly upset, you're restricting, like, their Second Amendment rights and stuff and whatever, and we have things defending the First and other amendments that are kept open as essential services, I don't think there's a big deal with just keeping the gun stores open. I don't think they're a huge part of, like, the social distancing and like other problems that we have right now. And so I would understand a bunch of arguments to keep those open. So I'm not like, I told them, I'm like, I'm not just gonna like sit here and listen to you talk about how like they definitely should be closed, because I don't think that's right. But if you ask me, if you made me the governor or whatever, I might just still choose to close them down, even if I see like logically how we could arrive at a different thing. I think practically how you practice your logic is different than like the logic itself, which lives independently of like your human actions.
Yeah, so I 1,000,000% disagree with that.
Okay.
I really do try, like, so I'm a very big believer. So a lot of people got really mad actually when I made the argument that like I put principles over friends. Like, I'm a really big believer that a person is nothing without having some principled approach to something. Like, I lose a lot of respect for people. Yeah, like if you have some principled position but you don't live it, then it means nothing to me. It's one of the big things that like oh my god! Like I don't believe that words people say. Like, it's how you, what do you do? How do you act in life? Like, I don't care what you argue, how you argue, whatever. Yeah. So,
but I mean, like, this again gets to what I'm talking about, where there's an obvious distinction between like your beliefs and stuff, but then when push comes to shove, how are you behaving? And I think there's like patterns of behavior you can take that don't show us the limits of what you allow yourself to do. So like if I had a dog and he was chained up in the yard, but he never like pulled so far as to like fully extend the chain, I feel like a lot of people could come away not understanding how far that dog could go if he never moves from the center of the yard. And I feel like if it, like, you want to define the fence, you want to define how far that chain can extend before the dog gets stopped. But if practically you never leave the center of the yard, I feel like that's important to note.
Yeah,
so
but
like,
it feels like
if
you make these arguments, it feels like what you're trying to do is you're trying to have your cake and eat it too. You're trying to say like, oh, well, I would logically defend this position, but I would never do that. Like, it feels like you're trying to stay in the good graces of people that disagree with it while still putting forth an argument for people.
Well, you can't say you'd never do it, because that would be taking like a principled take. But I mean, you can say like, no, you know what? I will defend people to the death for their right to be able to say blah, blah, blah in private speech. I think that's fine. And like, it doesn't, mess with my system at all. Personally, do I do that? Or like, am I just doing this, whatever? I don't. And I think you said like, do I use this in private? Do I just use the N-word all the time? Because I feel like that's what it makes it seem like. And I definitely don't. I think a similar caveat, but just that like, I honestly probably, like, now that I'm thinking about it, don't ever really use this word. And now that like my friends have like made it a big deal to me personally, like, because I have friends that are upset by it, maybe normal people would go like, like my friend, he told me like he was upset by it, and so I personally try not to. Even if you believe other people should be allowed to, like, if you want to say it in a joke or whatever.
That's not a principled take at all. Then you're just doing whatever is most convenient to you.
We could take out the caveat about trihex or a friend or whatever, and just say like, I will allow myself to say it. I don't think it's like logically unsound to say it or whatever. But personally, do I ever use that? No, not really.
I understand what you're saying. I completely and totally disagree. Like, it's like saying like, oh no, I totally fundamentally disagree. Like, every bone in my body. Okay. I just don't. I remember that like I got really upset once because I got into an argument with Hassan before, and we were talking about, he gave the take, you should never call the cops on anybody ever because they might deport the person because they might be an illegal immigrant. And I thought that was a very curious argument to make because I can think of several times where calling the cops is totally valid. It's not just capitalists defending their property. And one of the examples I gave was, okay, well, let's say that you're a woman, you're walking home at night, and there were two guys following you, thought you were going to get like robbed or raped. Do you think that person should call the police? And his response to that was, well, I don't think I would call the police. What is that? Like,
I don't believe that.
Wait, you don't believe what?
I don't believe he actually wouldn't call the police.
Oh, yeah, maybe. But regardless of what he does or doesn't, like, it feels like you're trying to walk both sides of the line. You want to say, like, oh, well, maybe it's okay. But then you're like, well, but I would never do it, to try to show, like, so if somebody would ask me, like, oh, would you ever use the N-word privately in a joke or whatever? Like, my response is going to be like, yeah, if I knew jokes that would do it or whatever, like, I would. I defend the position, like, full stop. Not like, well, I would defend it, but I would never do it. Like, that sounds like you're trying to, like, play both sides, like, hardcore.
Well, you're just giving that person context, I feel like. Like, I just want to put this as an aside, while I'm giving this to you, because you're okay with giving context for other arguments. So I feel like the context here, I don't know why it's different. I guess it feels Weasley for sure, but I think like that's because you're trying to look at it at a different level than I mean for people to take it. So like the reason I would include that caveat are for people who are not looking at things the same way as you. So for people that are just listening at the surface level, like I feel like that's an important caveat to have, and it really will change how they take the second
That's sure, and I can agree with that. So like I started like I think halfway into this, we're realizing where it was going because originally my position is just that there's a different standard I use for public and private humor, like which I think is kind of reasonable.
Sure.
And then it basically that all boiled down to literally just the N-word. And I think later on I started.
All people care about because it's the worst part of the whole
Sure,
thing.
yeah.
When you just say private, public. That's not what people really are arguing about. Of course, there's public-private language. What they don't like is that you use the N-word, that it comes off your lips. And that
just kind of weird. But sure, I understand that.
People on the internet.
But like later on, I started to like qualify a little bit more. Like, oh, like it's not like I say this word like blindly all the time. I don't describe people like, oh, that guy is an N-word or whatever. Like, I started to qualify it a bit more because I realized how people were taking it. Sure.
Okay. So it's probably Are we at a point now where like it's probably for the best to preface that you don't really use it much, or is that still feel wheezy?
Yeah, I mean,
a different way
like
of wording it.
Yeah, I guess like depending on how it's qualified, sure, I can understand that.
Yeah, so like the incest one, I think the best preface for the incest thing is to say, so this is like an intellectual exercise that I like to do with people because what it highlights is how you arrive at your conclusions about things. Incest is something where if you really think about it, you may have a much more nuanced take than you normally would. And that, depending on how far deep you go with that, you may come up with different conclusions. You may even flip-flop. And so it's a fun conversation to have. Like, I think people learn. Well,
but like, I still principally believe in the position, though. These aren't just like logic.
That's
okay.
You didn't say that you didn't not. You just said that like for the. So again, saying this, the caveat is for people who don't already have an intuitive understanding for what's going on.
Sure. Okay. So, like, I mean, I think I have said those words before too. Like I do say that quite a lot. Like, because people ask me like, well, why are you so obsessed with incest? Like, well, usually other people bring it up, but if people want to talk about it, it's a good way to see like where do your morals come from, or how do you generate like rights and wrongs. Yeah, sure. I said that word. When you say it like that, it sounds a lot worse. So like, if somebody comes up to me, and like I just changed the way this is presented, like it's some like hillbilly guy saying like, the way you really test your morals and your values, we talk about incest. I'll tell you what, I'm pro incest. Like that's kind of the vibe I feel like that people take when you combine those things in that order. Like we're gonna figure out about values by you convincing me that incest is right, like really destined. I don't feel like that helps you with the people that caveat is meant for. Maybe.
Does that make sense?
I kind of understand.
You tell them it's an intellectual exercise. I think they take it a lot less personally. They don't personally think that you personally believe in incest, and I think that gets it right off the bat. And it makes it more fun because they're not combative. They don't feel like, oh my gosh, this is an inherent like societal value that we have. I don't even understand why we have it at this point, but I feel like I have to argue about it with this guy. And if they don't know it's like for fun and games, I feel like it could be rough.
Sure, maybe, yeah.
So again, we're okay with the preface then on that N-word take on or private public language discussion.
That you can soften the blow by explaining your usage a little bit more, maybe. Yeah, depending on how you phrase it. Yeah, as long as it doesn't sound too easily, sure. Yeah,
because like with the incest thing too, like some people will come away thinking that this dude definitely banged a relative or something. Sure. And like it's totally not the intent of it, and it's probably something you never did, but because you made the justification, it feels like. Well, no. So I'm saying like to a rando.
I understand. I know what you mean.
Yeah. So like drawing that line, usually the reason people are drawing lines morally and whatever is because they have crossed or like do not want to cross a line. Like they're already in that area. So like if you're saying things like I want to allow myself to do X, Y, and Z, it almost feels like okay, there has to be a reason he wants to allow that.
Yeah, and everybody uses. They think everybody is engaged in motivated reasoning. If you're arguing something, it's because you want to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
I feel like that's all I really wanted to know, because a lot of this was like, does he actually use it a lot? Because if he does, this is going to be a very different conversation. But it sounds
sure,
like
and I would be suspect, and I tell people, and I am like super clear with that. I think you should be suspect of people that would like start to make these types of arguments, because oftentimes it's kind of like when somebody's like, "Oh, I'm a libertarian." It's like, "Oh, really? Well, like, what are some like really important parts of your stuff or whatever?" And it's like, "Let's talk about the age of consent. It shouldn't exist." It's like, okay, that's kind of weird that that's like the first place you run to, but.
Yeah, let's take that to the other side of the fence, though. Let's go back to practicality. So, like, we assume that they're practically using it, and that's why this principled position is interesting. Like, we're assuming something about that person. But, like, again, that still applies dually to you.
Sure, but I don't run to the N-word part first. Like, I always couch this as like, this is a discussion. I have a difference in private and public. It's other people that want to make it about the N-word immediately, right? Which makes me wonder. Part of it. Yeah, that would kind of be like if I was debating a libertarian, or if somebody was debating a libertarian, is like, I think that the states should intervene a lot less when it comes to, like, you know, people's rights, because I think it's an unjust hierarchy or whatever. And somebody were to counter that, would go, oh, so you want to fuck kids? I would look at that person like, well, wait, hold on. Much the same that, like, when I say, like, oh, I think there's different stances between private and public language, and somebody immediately goes to me like, oh, you just want to say the N-word private. Like, okay, I don't know why. It's like, that's the first place your fucking mind goes to, I guess. But, like...
Yeah. Did you want to talk at all about the Ariel talk?
Yeah, I do. That's really interesting to me, but I want to have, like, a dedicated, like, focused conversation. I want to play League about it. My main takeaway or my main question, I tried to be like pretty like nice-ish in that conversation. I didn't want to come off, I'm sure you can tell, like super combative, but like she was also like really slippery. So I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, I'd be curious to get your feedback on that. Yeah,
dude, it's so hard because I don't know if it's slippery or she actually has like a really good because I don't know enough about this stuff.
Yeah, I'm sorry. When I say slippery, that implies intent. I don't mean that she's intending to be slippery. That's just like it's very hard to nail her down on something. But they might be her genuine positions. That's why I said at the end, I don't know if she's arguing in bad faith. Like she's really trying to like
ready for everything. But then I go to her Twitter and she definitely knows what she's doing, and she admitted as much in the call that she's baiting people.
God damn, dude, I'm fucking popping off. But yeah, for sure, it's a really hard one. And that idea of identifying people that are operating in bad faith versus people that are just kind of dumb can be very, very challenging.
I mean, yeah, it could be. I mean, so at the very beginning, she started giving you... She was really good in the beginning, but when she broke down ID into these 4 parts, the biological, physical, emotional, and social, I thought that's where you guys were going to discuss. I feel like there's a lot to go on there.
Yeah, I tried to, but it felt like every time I pushed on something, immediately something she said prior would, like, give. Like, she would say things like, oh, fuck, I wish... Maybe if you go through the conversation, maybe you can find things where I felt like she would say one thing, like, oh, well, your experience in being a woman, well, if you look like a woman, you know, these are things that are part of your experience. And then when I'd be like, okay, well, what about, like, women that don't necessarily look like women? She's like, well, that's not important now because we have the other 3 dimensions or 2 dimensions. And I was like, but why can't we do that for... Yeah. It felt like she kept going back to, like, suit the argument to say that cis women never need to prove their gender, but trans women have to prove all the dimensions constantly or something. It was really hard to, like... It felt like she was being inconsistent, but maybe I missed something. I don't know.
Well, yeah, that was the thing. The why is it important to test? Why is it important to make, like, where is the importance in making a distinction between people who come into being trans or people who, like, we can look at their brain and see it? Like, I don't see where the benefit is in separating these people beyond on the internet where... Well,
the ultimate thing that she brought up was that she needed to protect... I think she said, I remember putting this down in my notes, she said we need to protect the concept of woman or something, or the concept of womanhood, that if we let too many trans people in, we're going to lose that. I think I asked her at one point, like, what's so valuable about that concept? Like, what would happen if we were to change how it was? I don't remember what her answer was, but I'm sure it's in there somewhere.
But we're asking for the abolition of gender while also defending the fundamental ideas of gender.
I don't know if she's asking for that.
Oh.
I don't think
didn't she say that she's gender abolitionist at the end? Didn't she say that?
Did she? If she did, I don't remember it.
Get rid of that and bring it to the sexes, and then trans people just identify with the sex that they feel is... Because it's all... They're trying to get rid of the gender part of it. That's my understanding.
I don't think she wanted...
doesn't say that.
No, I don't think she wanted gender abolitionism at all. I don't think so. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. But, okay, I'm going to go back to my league stuff, and then we can have a more detailed conversation about that at some point, okay?
Sounds good. Let me know.
All right, I love you. To like indict like all trans people because of the crimes of a few. That's what it feels like.